The Rusty Nail wasn't the kind of place Lucy Evans would normally set foot in. Perched on the edge of town where asphalt gave way to desert, its neon sign flickered erratically against the twilight sky, illuminating a parking lot filled with motorcycles instead of the sedans and SUVs she was accustomed to at the upscale restaurants where she worked. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and after being laid off from her waitressing job at the Silver Spoon, when the restaurant changed ownership, Lucy's bank account couldn't afford pride. The Rusty Nail needed a server, and she needed a paycheck. Simple economics. Her first week had been a baptism by fire, learning to navigate the rough clientele, memorizing the limited menu, and adapting to the owner's haphazard management style. By Friday night, exhaustion clung to her like the smell of fryer grease on her uniform. "Last table, then you can clock out," Marge, the senior waitress, called over her shoulder as she balanced a tray of beer pitchers. Some guy in the corner booth. Probably another blind date from that new app everyone's using. Lucy nodded, gathering her order pad and summoning a final customer service smile. The corner booth was partially obscured by shadows despite the establishment's aggressive overhead lighting. She could make out a broad-shouldered silhouette, but little else. When the leader of the notorious Steel Wolves Hells Angels chapter looked up from his whiskey glass and met her gaze, Lucy Evans had no idea that sitting down at the wrong table would irrevocably change the course of her life. If you love forbidden love stories, subscribe and don't miss the next one. She approached with professional efficiency, despite the day's fatigue weighing on her shoulders. "Evening. What can I get you?" The man didn't respond immediately. His gaze, startlingly perceptive beneath heavy brows, assessed her with unsettling thoroughness. Not the usual once-over she received from male patrons, but something more complex, more calculating. "You're new," he finally said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the scarred wooden table between them. "Started Monday." She maintained her professional smile, pad poised. "Special tonight is the double bacon burger with jalapeno poppers." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "Just the whiskey. Neat." Lucy nodded, turning to leave, when his voice stopped her. "You don't belong here." The observation, delivered without judgment or condescension, a simple statement of fact, caught her off guard. She pivoted back, professional mask slipping momentarily. "Neither does anyone else working minimum wage jobs," she replied, unexpected honesty breaking through her exhaustion. "But bills don't pay themselves." This time the amusement was unmistakable, transforming his hard features into something approaching handsome. "Fair enough." As she navigated back to the bar to place his order, Lucy became aware of the gradual silence spreading through the previously rowdy establishment. Conversations hushed. Pool games paused mid-shot. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume. "Christ, Lucy!" Marge hissed, grabbing her arm as she approached the bar. "You just walked up to Dominic Blackwood's table like it was nothing." The name meant nothing to her. Her blank expression prompted Marge's exasperated sigh. Dominic Devil Blackwood, president of the Steel Wolves. When Lucy still showed no recognition, Marge elaborated. "The Hells Angels chapter that basically runs everything west of the highway. Most dangerous man in 3 counties. Lucy glanced back toward the corner booth, seeing the leather cut with its distinctive patches that she'd somehow overlooked in her fatigue. The skull and wheels insignia of the notorious motorcycle club stood out starkly against worn black leather. "I just asked for his order," she said, confusion evident. He wanted whiskey. "Nobody approaches his table without being summoned," Marge explained, already pouring top-shelf whiskey with trembling hands. "Even Duke avoids him, and he owns the damn place." Lucy's stomach clenched with belated alarm. Her first week on the job, and she'd apparently violated some unspoken protocol with the most dangerous patron in the establishment. "Here." Marge thrust the whiskey glass toward her. "Bring this over. apologize for the intrusion, and then stay the hell away from that corner for the rest of the night. Balancing the whiskey carefully, Lucy retraced her steps, increasingly aware of the eyes tracking her movement across the floor. Dominic Blackwood hadn't moved, his imposing presence commanding the space around him despite his stillness. "Your whiskey," she said, placing it carefully on the table. "Sorry for the intrusion earlier, still learning the ropes." He studied her again with that same unsettling intensity. Up close, she noticed details her fatigue had initially obscured: the network of scars on his knuckles, the subtle gray at his temples contrasting with otherwise dark hair, the watchful intelligence behind his outwardly intimidating demeanor. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the opposite bench. Not a request, a command. "I'm still on shift," she replied automatically, professional instinct overriding the warning signals flashing in her brain. "Sit," he repeated, eyes flicking briefly to someone behind her. Lucy glanced over her shoulder to see Duke, the owner, making frantic nodding motions from behind the bar. The message was clear. Whatever Dominic Blackwood wanted, he got. Reluctantly, she slid into the booth opposite him, maintaining the rigid posture that had carried her through years of customer service jobs. "Is there something you need, Mr. Blackwood?" If her knowledge of his name surprised him, he didn't show it. "You were supposed to be meeting someone here tonight." The statement, delivered with such certainty, confused her. "No, I work here. This is my job." The blind date app. He sipped his whiskey, watching her over the rim of the glass. "You were meeting someone named..." He consulted his phone briefly. "Kevin." Understanding dawned with embarrassing slowness. "I'm not... You think..." Lucy shook her head. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here for a date. I'm your waitress." For the first time, something like genuine surprise crossed his features. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a deep sound that seemed to startle those nearby even more than his presence had. "Well, that explains a few things." He set his glass down. "Wondered why a woman like you would voluntarily walk into a place like this for a date." "A woman like me?" she echoed, uncertain whether to be offended. "Education in your speech pattern. Designer watch despite the waitress uniform. Car keys for a vehicle worth more than most bikes in the parking lot." His assessment was clinical, observational. "You're slumming it, temporarily." Lucy stiffened at having her circumstances so easily read by a stranger. "Not all of us have the luxury of choosing our circumstances, Mr. Blackwood." Before he could respond, the bar's entrance door swung open, admitting a burst of cool evening air and a nervous-looking man in his 30s, clutching a cell phone and scanning the room anxiously. Dominic's attention shifted instantly, his posture subtly changing from relaxed to alert. "And there's Kevin now," he murmured. Right on schedule, but at the wrong table. Lucy followed his gaze to the newcomer, who continued searching the room with increasing confusion. "That's your date?" "Not mine," Dominic replied, his expression darkening. "Bait." The moment stretched into uncomfortable silence as Lucy processed his words. Bait. The implication sent a chill through her despite the bar's overheated interior. "I should get back to work," she said, moving to slide out of the booth. "Stay." Again, not a request. Dominic's eyes remained fixed on the increasingly anxious man by the door. "Your shift ended when you sat down." Confusion and alarm warred within her. "What does that mean?" "It means Duke already clocked you out on my instruction. You're officially off duty." He finally looked at her again, something unreadable in his expression. "Which means you're free to leave, or stay. Your choice." Choice. The word seemed at odds with the command he'd given moments earlier. Yet Lucy found herself hesitating rather than immediately fleeing. Something about the situation, about him, triggered not just caution but curiosity. "Who is he?" she asked instead, nodding toward the man still searching the bar. And why is he bait? Dominic studied her for a beat, apparently weighing how much to reveal. Kevin Mercer, mid-level distributor for a synthetics operation moving into Steel Wolves territory. Been using dating apps to establish contacts for distribution. You're, what? Setting him up. The realization that she'd inadvertently stumbled into some kind of criminal operation sent a fresh wave of alarm through her. Gathering intelligence, he corrected. Need to understand their network before we shut it down. The casual reference to illegal activities should have sent her running. Instead, Lucy found herself oddly fixated on a different detail. So you're pretending to be a woman online to catch drug dealers? The absurdity of the image, this imposing, dangerous man catfishing criminals through dating apps, almost made her laugh despite the tension. My intelligence officer handles the digital side, Dominic clarified, though a hint of that earlier amusement returned to his features. I handle the real-world consequences. The way he said consequences left little doubt about what awaited Kevin Mercer. Lucy's moral compass spun wildly, caught between understanding the dangers of drug distribution and discomfort at being adjacent to vigilante justice. I really should go, she said, making another attempt to leave the booth. Probably wise. He didn't move to stop her this time. Though your car won't start. Lucy froze. Excuse me? Battery terminals disconnected, he said matter-of-factly. Standard procedure when we're conducting business here. Prevents unexpected departures. Anger flared, temporarily overriding her fear. You disabled my car? My security team did, he corrected. They'll reconnect it once our business is concluded. He checked his watch. About 20 minutes. You can wait here or at the bar. The calculated control of the situation, of her mobility, should have terrified her. Instead, it ignited something obstinate in Lucy's character, a refusal to be managed that had sometimes complicated her customer service career. 20 minutes, she repeated, settling back into the booth rather than retreating. Then I want my car fixed, and a sizable tip for the inconvenience. Surprise flickered across his face at her audacity, followed by what might have been respect. Fair enough. Across the room, Kevin Mercer had approached the bar, showing his phone to the bartender, who shrugged in apparent confusion. The man's frustration was visible even at a distance. He's looking for his date, Lucy observed. Someone named Scarlett, Dominic supplied. 28, dental hygienist, new to town, looking for someone to show her around. His tone made clear what he thought of Kevin's gullibility. And when she doesn't show up, he'll wait, order a few drinks, eventually leave. Dominic's attention remained fixed on the man. But not before my people document everyone he speaks with, everything he does. The methodical surveillance operation unfolding in an ordinary bar fascinated Lucy despite herself. And that helps you how exactly? Patterns, Dominic replied. Contacts, communication methods. Every piece builds the larger picture. As they watched, Kevin settled onto a bar stool, ordering a drink while continuing to check his phone. His demeanor projected disappointment rather than suspicion, clearly believing he'd been stood up rather than set up. So he's not actually being arrested tonight, Lucy clarified, her ethical discomfort slightly eased. Not tonight. Dominic sipped his whiskey. Information before action, always. The strategic patience reflected in his approach contradicted Lucy's assumptions about outlaw motorcycle clubs, about him. The stereotype of impulsive violence clashed with the calculated intelligence operation she was witnessing. You're staring, he observed without looking at her. Lucy flushed, caught in her scrutiny. Sorry, you're just not what I expected. From a Hells Angels president. This time he did look at her, one eyebrow raised in question. From someone Marge called the most dangerous man in 3 counties, she admitted. Something like amusement flickered across his features. Reputation serves its purpose. The cryptic response hung between them as Lucy found herself reassessing the man across the table. Dangerous. Certainly, the scarred knuckles and watchful gaze confirmed that much. But the thoughtful strategy, the measured responses, the unexpected moments of humor suggested complexity beyond simple brutality. "So," he said, breaking her reverie, "why is a woman with a designer watch and college diction waiting tables at the Rusty Nail?" The personal question caught Lucy off guard. "Economic necessity," she replied automatically. "Like I said, bills don't pay themselves. There are easier places to wait tables than here." "There are," she agreed. "But most have waiting lists for applications, or want references I don't have anymore." The admission felt uncomfortably revealing. The nail was hiring immediately, no questions asked. Dominic nodded once, accepting her explanation. The Silver Spoon, on Lakeside Drive. Lucy stiffened, alarmed that he knew her previous workplace. "How did you—" "Small town," he interrupted. "New ownership laid off most of the staff last month. Brought in their own people." The accurate summary of her employment situation did nothing to ease her concern. "You've been investigating me?" "Observing," he corrected. "Difference between surveillance and awareness." Before she could formulate a response, movement at the bar caught their attention. Kevin had engaged the bartender in conversation, showing something on his phone. The bartender's expression remained carefully neutral, but his eyes flicked briefly toward Dominic's table. "He's asking about suppliers." Dominic translated the silent exchange, trying to establish local connections. "And will your bartender give him any?" "Enough to maintain his interest, nothing substantive." His attention returned to Lucy. 20 minutes are up. Your car should be operational now." The abrupt dismissal, for that's what it was, caught her by surprise. Their conversation, unsettling as it had also been oddly engaging. Just like that. Just like that. He signaled to someone across the room with a subtle gesture. "You're free to go, Lucy Evans." The use of her full name, which she hadn't provided, served as a final reminder of the power imbalance between them. Whatever game had been played here tonight, he'd held all the cards from the beginning. Lucy slid from the booth, dignity intact despite the unnerving experience. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." "Dominic," he corrected, meeting her gaze one final time. "And Lucy, find a different place to work. The nail isn't for you." The concern, or was it a warning, lingered in her mind as she collected her belongings and headed for the exit. Behind her, the bar had returned to its normal rhythm, as if the strange interlude with the Steel Wolves president had never happened. In the parking lot, her aging Honda started on the first try. As promised, someone had reconnected the battery terminal. But as she pulled onto the highway, heading back toward her small apartment on the respectable side of town, Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in her carefully structured world. The blind date disaster, sitting at the wrong table, meeting the wrong man, felt strangely like fate rather than misfortune. A collision course she hadn't seen coming, but couldn't entirely regret. 3 days after the incident at the Rusty Nail, Lucy found herself unemployed again. Duke had called Sunday morning, voice uncomfortable as he explained that her services wouldn't be required going forward. No explanation offered, no 2-week notice given. Just a severed connection as abrupt as the battery terminal in her car. She didn't need to be told who was responsible. Monday morning found her at Westside Diner, a family establishment in the commercial district that represented a significant upgrade from the Nail, if not quite the caliber of the Silver Spoon. The manager, a harried woman named Janet, with efficiency in every movement, reviewed Lucy's application with surprising attentiveness. "Your experience is good," Janet acknowledged. "But I'm curious why you're not listed as a reference at the Nail. You were there recently, correct?" Lucy hesitated, uncertain how to explain her brief tenure without sounding unprofessional. "It wasn't a good fit," she finally said. "The environment was challenging." Janet studied her with shrewd eyes that suggested she understood more than Lucy had said. "Well, we have an opening for the breakfast and lunch shifts. When can you start?" The unexpected ease of securing the position left Lucy momentarily speechless. After weeks of rejections following the Silver Spoon closure, the swift acceptance seemed almost suspicious. "Tomorrow?" she managed, professional smile firmly in place despite her confusion. "Perfect. Uniforms in the back. 7 a.m. sharp." As Lucy gathered her belongings, a question nagged at her. "Janet, I'm grateful, but why me? You must have had other applicants." The manager's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something like discomfort crossing her features. "Let's just say your application came highly recommended, by people I don't ignore." The implication settled like a stone in Lucy's stomach. Dominic Blackwood's reach apparently extended far beyond the rusty nail. Her suspicion was confirmed 2 days later, when a motorcycle pulled into the diner's parking lot during the mid-morning lull. Through the front windows, Lucy watched as Dominic dismounted with fluid grace that belied his imposing size. Unlike at the nail, here he stood out sharply against the backdrop of family sedans and minivans. He settled into a booth in Lucy's section with deliberate intent, ignoring the curious stares from the diner's regular clientele. When she approached, order pad in hand, his expression remained unreadable. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him, professional mask firmly in place. "What brings you to the West Side?" "Breakfast," he replied, though the answer was clearly incomplete. "And checking on my investment." Lucy's spine stiffened. "I'm not your investment. The diner is," he corrected, though a hint of amusement suggested he'd deliberately provoked her. "I own 30% of this place. Silent partner." The revelation explained Janet's cryptic comment about recommendations she couldn't ignore. "So you got me fired from the nail and hired here. You didn't belong there." He said it matter-of-factly, as if rearranging her employment was an ordinary Tuesday activity. "This suits your skill set better. Regular clientele, better tips, safer environment." The presumption, however well-intentioned, ignited Lucy's rarely displayed temper. "You had no right to interfere with my life," she said, voice low but intense. "I don't need a career counselor, especially one who disabled my car without permission." Dominic studied her with that same unsettling intensity he'd shown at the nail. Few people in his world spoke to him with such direct challenge. Fewer still maintained eye contact while doing so. "Fair criticism," he acknowledged, surprising her. "Overstepped boundaries. Won't happen again without consultation." The concession, imperfect but genuine, diffused some of her anger. "Why do you care where I work? I was just a waitress who accidentally sat at your table." Something shifted in his expression, a brief glimpse beneath the controlled exterior. "People in my position don't believe in accidents, only patterns and purpose." "And what pattern am I part of?" she pressed, curiosity temporarily overriding caution. "That remains to be seen." He gestured to the menu. "Coffee, black, and whatever breakfast special doesn't have customers waiting 20 minutes. The abrupt shift back to customer-server dynamics was a clear dismissal of the deeper conversation. Lucy bristled, but maintained professionalism. "The farmer's skillet is ready in 10, hash browns, eggs, and sausage." "Perfect." As she turned to place his order, Dominic spoke again. "Your car, the silver Honda. It's making a noise when you accelerate past 40. Lucy froze. "How do you know that?" "Heard it when you left the nail. Timing belt's wearing thin. Get it checked before it breaks completely." The accurate assessment of her car's mechanical issues, something she'd been ignoring due to financial constraints, unnerved her almost more than his interference with her employment. The level of observation suggested continued attention she hadn't anticipated. "I'll keep that in mind," she replied stiffly, retreating to the kitchen. When she returned with his coffee, Dominic was reviewing documents on a tablet. His focus shifted entirely to business matters. He acknowledged the coffee with a nod, but remained absorbed in his work. The momentary connection between them apparently severed. Lucy found herself oddly disappointed. Throughout his meal, Dominic maintained that professional distance, responding to her service with polite efficiency, but nothing more. Only when she brought the check did he engage again. "The timing belt," he said, handing her a business card along with payment. "Ask for Wrench. Tell him I sent you. He'll fit you in today." Lucy examined the card. Kingston Auto Repair, an establishment on the edge of town she'd never visited. "I can't afford major car repairs right now." "He owes me favors," Dominic replied simply. "It won't cost you anything." The offer, or was it another command, triggered Lucy's independent streak again. "I don't take charity." Not charity, practicality. His gaze held hers steadily. "A broken timing belt leaves you stranded, possibly in areas less safe than the West Side. Prevention is strategic, not charitable." The logical framing of his concern made it harder to reject outright. And in truth, her car's increasingly worrying noises had kept her awake more than one night, calculating repair costs against her meager savings. "I'll consider it," she conceded, not quite accepting, but not rejecting either. Dominic nodded once, apparently satisfied with the partial victory. As he rose to leave, he hesitated, seemingly weighing his next words carefully. "Kevin Mercer was arrested last night," he said, voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "DEA operation, found with enough product to put him away for 20 years minimum." Lucy absorbed this information, uncertain why he was sharing it. "You called in the authorities?" "Provided anonymous intelligence," he corrected. "Some problems require official channels." "Why are you telling me this?" Dominic studied her for a moment, that unsettling perception cataloging her reactions. "Because you sat at my table concerned about ethical implications. Thought you deserved to know the outcome." The consideration behind the gesture, recognizing and addressing her moral discomfort from their first encounter, caught Lucy entirely off guard. It suggested an awareness of her perspective she hadn't anticipated from someone in his position. "Thank you," she said finally, sincerely, "for telling me." He nodded once, then turned to leave. At the door he paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "The diner closes at 3, he observed. "Kingston Auto is open until 7. Then he was gone, leaving Lucy with a business card, a paid check including a substantial tip, and the unsettling realization that Dominic Blackwood had somehow carved out space in her thoughts where no outlaw biker had any business residing. Despite her stubborn independence, Lucy found herself pulling into Kingston Auto at 4:30 that afternoon, the Honda's worrying noise having intensified during her drive home. The decision felt like surrender and self-preservation simultaneously, a complex sentiment that seemed to characterize her every interaction with the Steel Wolves president. What she couldn't have anticipated was how that single decision, to accept help rather than reject it on principle, would alter the trajectory of their unlikely connection. Or how the repair shop owned by Dominic's foster brother would become the next collision point in their increasingly intertwined paths. Kingston Auto Repair looked nothing like Lucy had imagined. Instead of the grimy, disorganized garage she'd expected from an establishment with motorcycle club connections, she found a modern facility with spotless floors, computerized diagnostic equipment, and a surprisingly welcoming reception area. "You must be Lucy," said the man behind the counter, mid-30s, with intelligent eyes and prosthetic left arm. "I'm Wrench," Dom called ahead. The nickname finally made sense given the prosthetic, which appeared custom-designed for mechanical work with specialized attachments. Lucy extended her hand, which he shook with his right. "He mentioned a timing belt issue," she said, determined to maintain the pretense that this was a normal customer-mechanic interaction, rather than another example of Dominic Blackwood's interference. Let's take a look. Wrench led her to a diagnostic bay, his movements confident despite the prosthetic. Keys? Lucy handed them over, watching as he popped the hood and began a methodical inspection. His expertise was immediately apparent, even to her untrained eye. "So how do you know Dominic?" she asked, aiming for casual conversation. Wrench's hands didn't pause in their work. Foster system. Different homes, same neighborhood. He kept the local predators off the smaller kids. A hint of smile crossed his features. "I was 90 pounds soaking wet until college." The image of a young Dominic protecting foster children conflicted with Lucy's mental framework of him as a dangerous outlaw. Before she could process this new information, Wrench continued, "Your timing belt's definitely shot. But that's not your biggest problem." He pointed to several components Lucy couldn't identify. "Coolant leak, brake pads nearly worn through, and your transmission's showing early failure signs." Lucy's stomach sank. "How much?" "Parts and labor? About $2,800. He delivered the devastating figure matter-of-factly. "More than the car's worth, honestly." The number represented nearly all of Lucy's carefully hoarded savings, money she'd been accumulating for a professional certification program that might lift her out of the service industry permanently. The strategic calculation must have shown on her face. "Dom said to handle it regardless of cost," Wrench added, his tone deliberately neutral. Pride warred with practicality in Lucy's mind. The offer was undeniably generous and equally unwelcome. "I can't accept that." "Figured you'd say that." Wrench didn't seem surprised. "He mentioned you're stubborn." "I prefer independent," she corrected, irritation flaring. "Independent people still make deals," Wrench countered. "What if you worked it off?" "We need someone to manage the front desk 3 evenings a week. Previous girl left for college." The suggestion caught Lucy off guard. A legitimate job offer rather than outright charity presented a more acceptable solution, though she still suspected Dominic's orchestration behind the scenes. "Would I be working for you or for him?" she asked directly. Wrench's laugh confirmed her suspicion. "Smart question. Technically me. But Dom owns 40% of this place, so both?" Before Lucy could respond, the repair shop's front door chimed. Through the open bay door, she watched as 3 men entered, none of whom resembled typical auto repair customers. Their matching tattoos and hypervigilant posture triggered immediate alarm bells. Wrench's demeanor shifted instantly, his casual friendliness replaced by wary alertness. "Get in the office," he instructed Lucy quietly. "Lock the door. Don't come out until I get you." The command, eerily similar to Dominic's authoritative tone, brooked no argument. Lucy retreated to the small office he'd indicated, closing the door behind her. Through the window blinds, she watched as Wrench approached the men with calculated casualness that didn't reach his eyes. Though she couldn't hear their conversation clearly, the body language told a story of territorial negotiation. The tallest visitor gestured emphatically, occasionally pointing toward the Steel Wolves insignia painted discreetly on the shop's back wall. Wrench's responses appeared measured but unyielding, his prosthetic arm suddenly seeming more weapon than disability. When the men finally left, tension visibly drained from Wrench's shoulders. He locked the front door, flipped the open sign to closed, and returned to the office where Lucy waited. "Sorry about that," he said, the casual tone clearly forced. "Unexpected visitors. Who were they?" Lucy asked, though she suspected the answer involved territory and rival clubs. "Desert scorpions." Wrench confirmed her guess. "They've been pushing boundaries since their new president took over, testing responses. And they came here because it's known Steel Wolves territory." He gestured to the subtle insignia. "Dom helped me start this place when I got out of the service. Makes it a symbolic target." The information added another layer to Lucy's evolving understanding of Dominic Blackwood. Not just enforcer, but investor and mentor, supporting a disabled veteran's business venture. Were they threatening you? She pressed. Not directly. They'd need a better reason to risk open conflict. Wrench ran a hand through his short hair. They were fishing for information, mostly. About Dom's movements. Club operations. Why? Because someone put a price on his head last week. The blunt revelation hung in the air. $1 million to whoever takes out the Steel Wolves president. Lucy's breath caught. $1 million? Who has that kind of money? Cartels moving into the territory. Dom's been disrupting their distribution network, like your friend Kevin Mercer. He wasn't my friend, Lucy corrected automatically, mind still processing the revelation. Does Dominic know? About the bounty? Of course. He always knows. Wrench's gaze sharpened. Question is, why am I telling you? The implied accusation snapped Lucy's attention fully to him. I don't understand. Dom sent you here for car repairs. Simple errand. But he also called ahead with specific instructions. Tell her everything if she asks. Wrench studied her with newfound intensity. He doesn't share club business with outsiders, ever. So what makes you different? Lucy had no answer. The question echoed her own confusion about Dominic's continued interference in her life. First her employment, now her transportation, and apparently some level of trust she hadn't earned and couldn't explain. I just sat at his table by mistake, she said finally, the explanation sounding inadequate even to her own ears. Dom doesn't believe in mistakes, Wrench replied, echoing Dominic's earlier statement. Only patterns and purpose. The repeated phrase sent an involuntary shiver down Lucy's spine. And what pattern am I part of? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Wrench's scrutiny was uncomfortably reminiscent of Dominic's assessing gaze. Because the last time Dom took interest in someone outside the club was Alyssa. And that ended with 3 bodies and a warehouse fire. The ominous reference hung between them, raising far more questions than it answered. Before Lucy could press for details, Wrench's phone chimed with an incoming message. Speak of the devil, he muttered, reading the screen. Dom's on his way. Says to keep you here. Alarm flared in Lucy. Keep me here. I'm not a prisoner. Never said you were. Wrench's tone softened slightly. But with desert scorpions circling and a bounty in play, the streets aren't safe for anyone connected to Dom right now. I'm not connected to him, Lucy protested, though the events of the past week made the denial ring hollow. Tell that to the 3 scorpions who just spent 10 minutes trying to figure out who the pretty blonde in Dominic Blackwood's territory might be to him. Wrench nodded toward the office window. They were watching you from the moment you drove in, and I guarantee they're watching still. The realization that she'd been under surveillance, and potentially in danger, simply for bringing her car to this particular shop settled like ice in Lucy's stomach. Whatever game Dominic Blackwood was playing, she had inadvertently become a piece on the board. How long until he gets here? She asked, resignation replacing resistance. 20 minutes, unless he takes the back roads to avoid tails. Wrench gestured to the small couch in the corner of the office. Make yourself comfortable. Coffee's decent if you want some. As he turned to leave, Lucy called after him, one final question pushing past her caution. Wrench, what happened with Alyssa? He paused in the doorway, expression grim. She got caught in the crossfire. Dom's never forgiven himself. His prosthetic arm gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he added, For your sake, I hope history isn't repeating. Dominic Blackwood arrived at Kingston Auto Repair via the back entrance, a precaution Wrench had predicted. His entrance carried none of the calculated intimidation Lucy had witnessed at the Rusty Nail. Instead, efficiency drove every movement as he assessed the situation, eyes scanning for threats before settling on her. You're not hurt, he observed, the statement carrying unexpected relief. Should I be? Lucy countered, anger rising at being drawn into danger she hadn't chosen. Your friend says I was being watched by people who want you dead. Dominic's gaze flicked to Wrench, who shrugged unapologetically. You said to tell her everything if she asked. Context matters, Dominic replied, a rare flash of irritation breaking through his controlled demeanor. He returned his attention to Lucy. The desert scorpions were here? 3 of them, Wrench confirmed. Standard information gathering, nothing aggressive. Yet, Dominic amended, they're escalating gradually, testing boundaries. Lucy watched this exchange with mounting frustration. I'm still here, she reminded them sharply, being discussed like a security problem rather than a person. Dominic's expression shifted, something almost apologetic crossing his features. You're right. This situation is complicated, but that's not an excuse. The acknowledgement, simple but seemingly genuine, diffused some of Lucy's anger. Why am I involved at all? I'm just a waitress whose car broke down. The timing of your appearance at the nail coincided with increased scorpion activity, Dominic explained, choosing his words carefully. Initial concern was potential infiltration. Understanding dawned. You thought I was working for them. Spying on you? Standard precaution. New faces in established territory warrant investigation. The revelation that she'd been under suspicion explained his initial interest, but not his continued involvement in her life. So you checked me out, confirmed I wasn't a threat. End of story. Why the job at the diner? Why send me here for repairs? A loaded glance passed between Dominic and Wrench, before the latter tactfully excused himself, leaving them alone in the office. Once the door closed, Dominic's carefully maintained facade seemed to shift, revealing something more complex beneath. The background check revealed more than expected, he admitted. Northwestern University. Business degree with honors. Internship at Meridian Financial cut short when your father's embezzlement charges went public. Lucy froze, blood rushing in her ears. Her carefully compartmentalized past, the life before service jobs and financial struggle, laid bare by someone who had no right to uncover it. You had no right, she whispered, echoing her thoughts. No, he agreed unexpectedly. I didn't. But threat assessment is automatic in my world. Apologies don't change that reality. So what? You felt sorry for the fallen rich girl? Decided to play benefactor? Bitterness edged her words. I don't need your pity. Not pity, he corrected, maintaining steady eye contact. Recognition. Of what? Someone rebuilding after everything collapsed. Someone refusing to be defined by circumstances beyond their control. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability at odds with his dangerous reputation. Someone adapting to a world they never chose. The parallel between them, unlikely as it seemed, resonated uncomfortably. Lucy had indeed been rebuilding, one minimum wage job at a time, refusing to contact former connections who had abandoned her family during the scandal. Even if that's true, she said carefully, it doesn't explain why you're involving me in whatever this is. She gestured vaguely to encompass the locked repair shop and implied danger outside. That wasn't intentional, Dominic admitted. The Scorpions accelerated their timeline. Put out the bounty earlier than intelligence suggested. Change the board. And I'm what? Collateral damage? Potential leverage, he corrected grimly. They saw you at the nail. Now here, creating connections that didn't previously exist. The implication settled heavily. They think I'm important to you. Perception creates vulnerability regardless of reality. His tactical assessment was clinical, despite the personal subject matter. They'll watch you, follow you, look for opportunities. To get to you, Lucy concluded, the dangerous position she'd inadvertently entered becoming clearer. So what happens now? Dominic moved to the office window, checking the street with practiced vigilance before responding. You have options. Limited, but real. Such as? Protective custody, club safe house until the Scorpion situation resolves. Or, he hesitated, seemingly weighing his next words carefully. Relocation assistance, new ID, fresh start somewhere the Scorpions can't find you. Both options represented a complete disruption of her carefully reconstructed life, such as it was. How long would either take? Safe house, potentially weeks. Relocation, 3 days to arrange. The matter-of-fact assessment of completely upending her existence ignited fresh anger in Lucy. And if I refuse both? If I just go back to my apartment and continue my life? Something darkened in Dominic's expression. Then history potentially repeats. Wrench's ominous reference to Alyssa resurfaced in Lucy's mind. "Tell me about Alyssa," she demanded. Wrench mentioned her, said she got caught in the crossfire. Dominic went still, the name clearly striking a nerve. For a moment, Lucy thought he might refuse to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an unfamiliar weight. "Alyssa Martinez, kindergarten teacher. We met when her brother needed help with hospital bills." His gaze fixed on some distant point. Connection developed. Inadvisable, but genuine. What happened to her? Rival club targeted her apartment, meant as warning, not execution. His jaw tightened. Fire spread faster than intended. She died of smoke inhalation before emergency services arrived. The clinical description couldn't mask the underlying emotion: regret, guilt, perhaps even grief. For the first time, Lucy glimpsed the man beneath the Steel Wolves' president, someone capable of attachment and loss despite his dangerous world. "I'm sorry," she offered, the words inadequate but sincere. Past events, non-reversible. His professional mask reasserted itself, vulnerability disappearing behind tactical focus. Present concern is preventing repetition. The conversation stalled as Lucy processed everything: her unwitting entry into club politics, the danger by association, the glimpse of Dominic's personal history. Before she could formulate a response, his phone vibrated with an incoming message. His expression hardened as he read the screen. "Decision timeline just accelerated," he announced, already moving toward the door. "Scorpions on approach, multiple vehicles. We leave now." "Wait, I haven't decided anything yet. Immediate safety first, long-term plans after." He opened the office door, calling to Wrench, who appeared instantly. "Protocol 7, northeast exit, 2 minutes. Wrench nodded, already moving with practiced efficiency toward what appeared to be a gun safe in the corner. Lucy watched in stunned silence as he removed and checked a handgun before offering it to Dominic, who secured it inside his leather cut. "Lucy." Dominic's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "I need your trust for the next 30 minutes. After that, all choices remain yours. But right now, we need to move." The urgency in his tone, different from his usual controlled authority, conveyed genuine concern. Through the front windows, Lucy glimpsed 2 dark SUVs moving slowly down the street toward the shop. Decision time collapsed to mere seconds. Stay and potentially face whatever violence approached, or go with the dangerous man who had somehow entangled himself in her life, a man she barely knew yet, who seemed determined to protect her. 30 minutes, she agreed finally. Then we talk, about everything. Dominic nodded once, relief briefly visible before tactical focus reclaimed his expression. "Through the garage, stay close." As they moved swiftly toward the rear exit, leaving Wrench to create a diversion, Lucy found herself wondering how her life had transformed so dramatically in the span of a week. From anonymous waitress to apparent leverage against the most dangerous man in 3 counties. From rebuilding her life one shift at a time to fleeing immediate danger. The blind date disaster, sitting at the wrong table, had somehow become a collision course with consequences she couldn't have imagined. And as Dominic guided her toward his waiting motorcycle, she realized the collision was just beginning. Aqui está o ato faz com exatamente 1.200 palavras. ACT FAI, the choice. The safe house was nothing like Lucy had imagined. Instead of a fortified compound bristling with armed guards, Dominic had brought her to a modest lakeside cabin 30 miles outside town. Surrounded by pine trees and accessible only by a winding dirt road, its seclusion provided natural security that steel gates and surveillance cameras couldn't match. "Scorpions won't find this place," Dominic assured her as he secured the perimeter, checking sight lines and potential approach routes with practiced efficiency. Property registered under Shell Corporation, no connection to the club. Lucy stood on the small porch, watching twilight settle over the lake. After the adrenaline of their escape, weaving through back roads on Dominic's motorcycle, constantly checking for pursuit, the cabin's peaceful setting felt almost surreal. "How long do we stay here?" she asked when he finally joined her on the porch. "Tonight confirmed. Beyond that depends on intelligence reports." He leaned against the railing, unusually relaxed away from public scrutiny. "And your decision." "My 30 minutes are long expired," Lucy pointed out. "You promised we'd talk. About everything." Dominic studied her for a moment, weighing something internally before nodding once. "Fair enough. Ask what you need to know." The direct invitation, so unlike the careful control he usually maintained over information, caught Lucy off guard. After days of confusion and half-truths, she suddenly had permission for complete transparency. "Why did the Desert Scorpions put a bounty on you specifically?" she began, starting with the immediate danger rather than their complicated connection. "I disrupted their distribution network," he explained. "Steel Wolves territory has been drug-free for 15 years. Club policy, no hard substances, no dealers. We enforce through information gathering and anonymous tips to authorities. Like with Kevin Mercer." "Exactly. 8 similar operations in the past 3 months, all based on intelligence my network collected." The revelation aligned with what Lucy had witnessed at the Rusty Nail: strategic surveillance rather than direct violence. That doesn't sound like typical outlaw biker behavior. Something like amusement flickered across Dominic's features. Most clubs evolved past the 60s stereotype. We're businesses now. Community organizations with complicated histories. Businesses that still operate outside the law, she pointed out. "Some aspects, yes," he acknowledged. "Protection services, conflict resolution, territorial management. But substance trafficking creates instability, addiction, death. Bad for communities, bad for legitimate business interests." The pragmatic approach to criminality, some acceptable, some not, challenged Lucy's black and white assumptions about outlaw organizations. Before she could process this recalibration, another question surfaced. "At Kingston Auto, you told Wrench to tell me everything if I asked. Why trust me with club information when you barely know me?" This question seemed to catch him off guard. A rare moment of hesitation before he responded. "Instinct, reinforced by background investigation. My Northwestern degree qualified me for MC confidentiality?" Skepticism edged her tone. "No, your response to adversity did." His gaze held hers steadily. "Financial ruin, family scandal, career derailment, yet you rebuilt without compromise, maintained ethics despite pressure, showed resilience in circumstances that break most people." The assessment, uncomfortably accurate, felt like both compliment and invasion. "You don't know me," she insisted, though the protest sounded hollow even to her ears. "I know enough," he countered. "The rest. I wanted to learn." The admission hung between them, that his interest had evolved beyond security concerns into something more personal, more complicated. Lucy turned back toward the lake, using the darkening horizon to avoid his perceptive gaze. One last question. The most important one. She gathered her courage before continuing. "What happens if I choose to walk away? From the safe house, from relocation, from all of this?" "The Scorpions will continue surveillance," Dominic replied honestly. They'll watch for patterns, vulnerabilities, opportunity. To use me against you. Yes. But why? Lucy turned back to face him directly. Why would hurting me impact you at all? I'm nobody to you. Just a waitress who sat at your table by accident. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. A rare glimpse beneath the tactical calculation to something more human, more vulnerable. Because I recognize something, he said quietly. The first moment at the nail. Something familiar. What? She pressed when he didn't elaborate. Someone navigating a world they never chose. Building something meaningful from circumstances others created. His voice carried unusual emotion. Someone who refuses to be defined by the hand they were dealt. The parallel between them, a Hells Angels president and a disgraced financier's daughter, should have been laughable. Yet Lucy couldn't dismiss the resonance of his words, the unexpected recognition she'd felt during their interactions despite their vastly different worlds. So what now? She asked, the question encompassing everything. Her safety, their connection, the uncertain future stretching before them. Now you choose, he replied simply. Safe house until the threat passes. Relocation with new identity, or... He hesitated, seemingly uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. Third option. More complicated, less conventional. Which is? Stay. Not hiding, not running. Under visible club protection. His expression remained carefully neutral despite the weight of his suggestion. Send clear message that you're under Steel Wolf's guard. Make you too high profile for Scorpions to target without consequences. The implication registered immediately. You mean publicly associate with you, with the club? Yes. That would make the connection real, she observed. Not just Scorpion perception. Correct. No evasion, no manipulation. Just honest acknowledgement of the reality his suggestion entailed. And after the threat passes, what then? Lucy asked the question that hung unspoken between them, about whatever connection had been forming beneath their practical alliance. That would be your choice, Dominic replied. Always your choice. The respect for her agency, despite the protection he offered, struck Lucy deeply. After her father's betrayal had stripped away her future, after financial necessity had limited her options, after circumstances beyond her control had defined her path, here was someone offering both safety and autonomy simultaneously. I need time, she said finally, to think, to process everything. Of course. He straightened from the railing. Cabin has 2 bedrooms. Security system activated. I'll take first watch. As he turned to leave her with her thoughts, Lucy called after him. Dominic? He paused, looking back with that unsettling perceptiveness that seemed to see through her carefully constructed defenses. Thank you, she said simply, for the options, for the truth. Something softened in his expression, not quite a smile, but a genuine reaction nonetheless. Whatever you decide, Lucy Evans, know that sitting at my table was never a disaster, not from where I stand. The reference to their unlikely meeting, the blind date mistake that had catalyzed everything, carried undercurrents that neither was quite ready to name. Yet as Lucy watched him disappear inside the cabin, she found herself reconsidering the nature of disaster and fortune, of accidents and purpose. Morning would bring necessary decisions about her safety, her future, her unexpected connection to a man whose world couldn't be more different from the one she'd planned for herself. But for tonight, watching stars emerge over the lake, Lucy allowed herself to consider that perhaps the most significant collisions in life aren't those we avoid, but those we embrace despite their inherent danger. Sometimes the wrong table leads exactly where you need to go. Epilogue: The Price and the Promise. 6 months after the night at the lakeside cabin, Lucy Evans sat at her desk reviewing quarterly projections. Through the glass walls of her office, She could see the organized activity of Kingston Auto's newly expanded front section, mechanics consulting with customers, appointments being scheduled, paperwork processed with efficient precision. The transformation from struggling repair shop to thriving business had happened with remarkable speed once Lucy implemented the systems she'd learned during her Northwestern days. Computerized scheduling, customer relationship management, strategic marketing to attract higher-end clientele, all while maintaining Wrench's impeccable mechanical standards and fair pricing for longtime customers. Her official title was Operations Manager, though in practice, she functioned more as a business partner. The irony wasn't lost on her, that after her father's financial disgrace had derailed her corporate trajectory, she'd found her way back to business leadership through the most unexpected channel imaginable: a Hells Angels president and a one-armed mechanic. The door chimed as another customer entered, or so she thought until familiar footsteps approached her office. Dominic Blackwood hadn't changed significantly in the months since their first encounter. The same watchful intensity, the same controlled power in his movements. What had changed was Lucy's perception of the man beneath the Steel Wolves' president patch. "Quarterly numbers look good," he observed, nodding toward her computer screen as he closed her office door. The privacy glass activated automatically, another upgrade she'd implemented. 15% increase over projections, she confirmed. The fleet servicing contracts are paying off faster than anticipated. Dominic settled into the chair opposite her desk, with the relaxed ease that only emerged in private moments. "Wrench says you've been working late again." "Someone has to keep your legitimate businesses profitable," she countered with a slight smile, "since your other managers lack my particular qualifications." The reference to her education, once a source of pain and loss, had gradually transformed into a point of pride as Lucy reclaimed her expertise, this time on her own terms. Beyond Kingston Auto, she now provided strategic guidance for 3 other Dominic-affiliated businesses, creating a legitimate business network that paralleled his club operations. Speaking of other businesses, Dominic reached into his leather cut, extracting a small USB drive. "The West Side Diner numbers. Janet's record-keeping needs work." Lucy accepted the drive, their fingers brushing momentarily. "I'll review them tomorrow. Janet's old school, but she runs a tight operation otherwise. Professional conversation. Their public face. Maintained even in private as a form of comfortable routine. Only after business matters concluded did the subtle shift occur, the carefully maintained boundaries between club president and business manager, softening into something more complex, more personal. "Town meeting tonight," Dominic reminded her. 7 o'clock. "I remember." Lucy closed her laptop, gathering her things. "Should I meet you there, or are you riding with me?" "Neither. Taking separate vehicles is still protocol for public events." The practical security measure, never arriving or leaving together despite their widely acknowledged connection, had become second nature over months of careful navigation between their worlds. Lucy no longer questioned such precautions, having witnessed firsthand the calculated dangers that shadowed Dominic's existence. The Desert Scorpion's threat had eventually subsided, though not without cost. The club war had escalated briefly before federal authorities, working with anonymous intelligence that Lucy suspected came from Dominic's network, had dismantled the Scorpion's leadership on RICO charges. The bounty had disappeared with their organizational structure, though Dominic maintained prudent security measures even now. Lucy had chosen the third option that night at the cabin, neither hiding nor running, but instead stepping deliberately into association with the Steel Wolves. Her presence at Dominic's side at strategic public events had sent the intended message. She was under protection that would make any attempted leverage extremely costly. What neither had fully anticipated was how that strategic alliance would evolve into something more authentic, more meaningful than mere security theater. "Your security detail confirmed for the Northwestern alumni event next weekend?" Dominic asked, as they walked together toward the shop's rear exit, their standard departure protocol. Lucy nodded. "Tank and diesel, though I still think it's excessive for a university fundraiser 300 miles away." Excessive would be me personally accompanying you into a room full of corporate executives and hedge fund managers, he countered with rare humor. Tank and Diesel are the compromise. The alumni event represented a significant step in Lucy's personal journey. Her first return to her former world since her father's scandal had forced her exit. The invitation had arrived unexpectedly, part of the university's outreach to alumni in business leadership roles. After considerable deliberation, she had accepted, ready to reclaim that part of her identity without shame or evasion. "I've been meaning to ask," she said, pausing before they reached the exit door. "How do you feel about me reconnecting with that world, my old world?" Dominic studied her with that perceptive gaze that had initially unnerved her, but now felt like being truly seen. "It was always part of you, Lucy. Denying it serves no purpose. Even though it's fundamentally different from..." She gestured vaguely between them, encompassing everything their relationship represented. The unlikely connection between legitimate business and outlaw organization, between corporate education and street knowledge. "Different worlds can coexist," he replied simply. "We've proven that much." The truth of his statement settled comfortably between them. Over months of careful navigation, they had indeed created something unprecedented, a relationship that honored both their separate realities and their shared connection, neither compromising the essence of who they were. Outside, twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and purple. Dominic's motorcycle waited in its usual spot, while Lucy's new SUV, purchased with her legitimate earnings rather than club charity, stood nearby. Separate vehicles, separate departures, even though they would likely end the evening at the same location. "See you at the meeting," Lucy said, their standard public farewell. Dominic nodded, but hesitated before mounting his bike. "The Northwestern event," he began, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his tone. "If you preferred to attend without club association, without the complication my connection represents, that would be understandable." The offer, giving her freedom to temporarily step away from their association for professional advancement, demonstrated yet again the respect for her autonomy that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Unlike her father, unlike the financial world that had abandoned her, unlike even the practical necessity that had initially brought them together, Dominic consistently honored her right to choose her own path. "I've never hidden from complicated truths," Lucy replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm not starting now." Something like pride flickered across his features. Not possession, but genuine appreciation for the strength she'd reclaimed through their unlikely alliance. As they departed in separate directions, maintaining the practical security measures their reality required, Lucy reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here, from accidental meeting to strategic alliance to genuine partnership. Each step had been freely chosen despite the inherent complications. The blind date disaster, sitting at the wrong table, meeting the wrong man, had somehow led to exactly where she needed to be. Not a conventional path, not an easy one, but ultimately one that honored both who she had been and who she had become. Sometimes the most meaningful connections form at the precise intersection of different worlds, and sometimes the wrong table turns out to be exactly the right place after all. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and don't miss the next ride.